Good evening, fellow Toastmasters. Tonight is a momentous occasion. This speech is special because it is the last speech in this path. I'm finally done. This is also a big deal because I've been working on team collaboration for almost 5 years. I'm ready to start my next path. In this case, I mean for Toastmasters, but I'm always ready to start my next path in life, whatever that may be. Tonight, I will reflect on what I learned from my speeches. I will continue with my accomplishments in Toastmasters and end with my goals as I commence my new path. Some of what you hear may sound familiar from previous speeches. Here are the lessons I learned from my speeches. I learned a lot. I wish I could share everything with you all because I think every lesson is valuable. But if you all remember my speech about flying with kids long distance, I tried to squeeze everything in and qualified right at the 7-minute and 30-second mark. Tonight, I'll give myself a buffer and share only a few points with you all. A common theme in my speeches are leadership and how that relates to my role as a parent. So I will relate my leadership experience inside and outside of Toastmasters to parenting. The first thing I learned is to be confident in myself and my ideas while asking for help when needed. Just last week, I was Toastmasters for the backwards meeting, and I'd never even been to one. I missed the recent one, the most recent one. In order to prepare, I reached out to our president, Andy, for some tips of what to expect and just what to do to keep the meeting flowing backwards. So I appreciate all the tips you provided for that meeting. For a project outside of Toastmasters, I started up a Yom HaShoah project. For those of you who don't know, Yom HaShoah is Hebrew for Holocaust Memorial Day, which commemorates the anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. When I first started this project, which involved connecting teen volunteers with Holocaust survivors, I consulted a couple of people on the Yom HaShoah committee. I wanted to create a program in a sensitive way for our Holocaust survivors. I chose these mentors because I knew them well. They served on the committee for a long time and had parents who were Holocaust survivors. One of the people I reached out to voiced her concern that this would be traumatic for our teen volunteers, because what if something would happen to the survivor she was paired with, such as an illness or a death, which isn't impossible due to their older age. It got me thinking, what if she's right? What if something would happen and one of our volunteers would be traumatized under my watch? But the other person I spoke to said, this is your project. You need to do what you think makes sense. I agreed with her advice and went forward with my idea. The same is said for raising children. There are a million decisions to make, some large, some small. What school to send them to, what they should wear that day, what to feed them. Sometimes you have no choice but to make the decision on your own at that exact moment. The more you make decisions, the easier it will become to do, and you'll be more confident in yourself. The second thing I learned is to cut yourself slack because life happens. Last year, when I was president of Toastmasters, you may remember that I had a baby. So I gave myself a few weeks to rest a little bit and take care of my baby. And then a couple of weeks later, I decided I'm feeling really good. I think I have a good routine going on. Let me get back into my role as president. I really enjoyed finding those quotes of the week and moments in history to kick off the meeting. So I jumped back into that, and I realized a couple of weeks later, I think I jumped in a little too soon. I think I was still a little more tired, and I think re-adding those extra tasks to my plate was wearing me out. So I decided to end my term early and pass the baton on to someone else to help end our year. It's the same with the Yom HaShoah project. In the end, it didn't take off. I had my baby. The girls were busy with end of the year obligations, and one of our survivors had to take care of her husband who was sick. Life happens to all of us. At first, I told myself if I would have worked harder or faster and did something different, my project might have been successful. I had to remind myself that I didn't do anything wrong. Plans change and you just have to go with the flow. Same with parenting. You decide to do something, let's say go to the pool, but it ends up raining, so that doesn't happen. Or you take the kids for ice cream, but the ice cream store is closed. You didn't do anything wrong because the plans didn't pan out. Just make a decision of what to do next. Just go with the flow. Third, I learned to set a good example. I told a story in a previous speech about someone I know who gave classes once a week on how to raise children to act properly. Around the time of the 2020 election, she gave a class about how to talk about the election in front of children. A common question she received was, how can we raise children with a president who's disrespectful to other people? She responded by telling them that the president is not the one raising your kids. As the parent, they have to set the tone. We all are parents. We have to set the tone for our houses, and we have to teach the kids to respect other people. This reminds me of the idea in Judaism that a Jewish mother is called an Akeret Habayit, which is Hebrew for foundation of the home, who, according to Rabbi Nisan Dubav, determines the character and atmosphere of the household and the future of the children in particular. Kids may be influenced by what they watch on TV, the music they listen to, and the friends they hang out with. But at the end of the day, the parents are the ones who set the tone for the home and set the example of how the kids should behave inside and outside the home. That's something to remember when you're concerned about who influences your children. As psychologist Adam Grant said, great leaders develop people, great leaders have values, and great leaders are role models in life. Something else I learned about myself was my leadership styles, which I learned according to Discover Your Leadership Style questionnaire and my leadership style project. Those 3 styles are affiliative, coaching, and democratic. Affiliative focuses on creating harmony and positive personal relationships. Coaching prepares people for the future by building skills while communicating positive statements. And democratic encourages mentees to collaborate on decision-making opportunities. How do these all tie together? My husband and I will create a safe and loving environment in which the children trust that they can trust us and feel confident enough to talk to us. Give them space to figure out new skills without rushing to help them, and confidently problem solve and make decisions. I've been working very hard to let my daughter figure out how to climb to the top, all the way to the top of the jungle gym at the playground, and let my son go up to the slide and down the slide by himself without my help. They are both doing great. Sometimes I have to remind myself not to hover while they're playing and give them a little space to problem solve when they have a conflict with friends at the playground or at the pool without me getting involved. As Dolly Parton said, if your actions create a legacy that inspires others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, then you're an excellent leader. Another thing I learned was not to belittle the people you work with. Don't air out grievances in other people. Instead, empower by being supportive. Provide constructive criticism in private, but praise in public. This was an experience that happened to me. As you may remember from a previous speech, that I had a coworker who was just did exactly that to me. She would make fun of how I would work by telling me that if there was a way that I didn't set something up properly, she'd say, "Oh, my kids can her own children can do better than that." And would say I had no helper, instead of saying, "Oh, this is what I would want you to do." So that's something to remember, even with parenting. Just praise and maybe give constructive criticism or constructive support in private, and to praise in public. As Jack Welch said, who is a former chairman and CEO of General Electric, before you're a leader, success is all about growing yourself. When you become a leader, success is all about growing others. The last thing I learned is to celebrate successes. Be proud of your accomplishments and share them with others, like I'm doing with you all tonight. I mentioned this in a previous speech about working in groups, but this still applies to individual projects. I will now transition into reflecting on my Toastmasters experience so far. My accomplishments include having served on various positions the Toastmasters board, including president and secretary 2 years in a row. I participated in 2 contests as a contest master and 1 time as a contestant. I didn't move on to the district level, but I'm really proud of myself for even participating. I also, as I mentioned, led the backwards meeting as Toastmaster, even though I've never been to a backwards meeting before. Funny story. It was brought to my attention that I forgot to call on the evaluators to ask what they will be looking for before the speech, after the speech. Hard to tell in a backwards meeting. So I just called on them at the same time and everyone laughed and we still had a great time. So here's a freebie lesson. Have fun and figure it out as you go. Finally, my goals for Toastmasters going forward. I want to try to speak more often without stressing about writing a speech, try to complete a path faster, maybe less than 5 years this time. I want to try to rely less on my notes, put the lectern aside, and try to stand up more while giving speeches on Zoom. As Bruce Lee said, if you spend too much time thinking about a thing, you'll never get it done. I'll have to remember that next time I'm scheduled to speak. In conclusion, I learned that I need to be more confident in my decisions, cut myself slack, and remember that life happens. Set a good example, foster a sense of trust in our home, and give my children the space to figure things out on their own, praise in public, and celebrate successes. Going forward, I will remind myself of these lessons as I begin my new path, prepare for speeches in the future, and use my leadership skills outside, even inside of Toastmasters as well. I'm very excited to see what the next 5 years will bring for Toastmasters. Maybe I'll complete 2 paths. Thank you for not only listening to my speech, but for celebrating with me as I complete my first pathway. Mazel tov.